Well, maybe I'll go ahead and get us started just since we have at least half of us here. And thank you, Melissa, for watching as others may trickle in. But most of us have been at most of the meetings so far. And I know, Sandy, you've been kind of keeping up via email, but maybe we'll just give a quick rundown, let you introduce yourself and everyone else say hi, but why that's going on. Can everybody again, please put their contact information in the chat so we can keep track of who attended. Appreciate it. But Sandy, as you may have picked up on, or everyone else, Elaine too, we've had a request from local schools to provide some support around e-bike safety due to some challenges that the schools themselves and principals and families were experiencing. And while we know there is so much out there, I definitely want to give a shout out to Community Cycles and their e-bike hub. And the county just initiated a page that is our now e-bike hub. One of the resources that we've identified that might be missing is something kind of specific from that family or from the school lens, student kind of family lens. And so this work group is quickly trying to come up with some sort of resource we can provide principals and or schools and sort of this back to school timeframe, just as a starting point. It may not be the end all be all, but at least it's something to get a response to the principals who are really asking for help and guidance around what do we do around e-bikes. And Landon, please add if that didn't summarize it accurately, but I think so.
Yep, Cami, that's just right.
Okay, so we've met, this is our third time. We've been brainstorming some messaging ideas, and of course it's gone very broad, and we're going to hone it in to what are those messages that are really e-bike specific to schools and students and families, and not necessarily reinvent the wheel of all the safety tips that are already out there that we can link people to. So that's what this work group has been focusing on. And so today we really have two agenda items or two goals. And that is, I will present to you the best that I could, a summary of the talking points that you all have suggested or key messages that need to go out there, and weeded out the ones that might be duplicative from other places already. And really, what are those narrowed down? I think I have 6, maybe 7 messages out of all of the 30, 40, 50 kind of ideas we originally started with. And I have some design templates to show you to see what you all react to as far as what might be the right way to go, because and then review all of the ideas for the collateral material that we've had. I'm keeping track of all of those, but again, for right now, we're really focusing in on developing a handout that we can distribute to schools, and maybe some social media templates that go along with these key messages and handouts. So that's sort of where we're at right now. So any questions from anybody, or anybody wants to add anything real quick? Yes, Sandy.
You had mentioned creating like a flyer or outreach materials. We would love some of those for when we do go outreach in the community. Happy to convey messaging around that.
Well, I'm really glad you're here, because I have a screenshot of your website, and I'm hoping maybe we can plug it into like one of the little places on your website as just an additional resource amongst the plethora of amazing resources you all have already pulled together. So I'm trying to keep us focused. So some of you last week got the link to our Jamboard, but if not, I'm going to share that again quickly. And let me just minimize this, and we will go over where we're at there, or how, sorry. Multitasking seems to be tricky for me at the moment. Okay, here comes a Jamboard link. Everybody should have access to it. If you pull it up, you should be able to edit it. It's the same one as last time. We've just added a few pages, and we're going to kind of review that today. And then I have another handout that I'm going to go ahead and try to attach, or actually, Melissa, I might send it to you while we're chatting, and maybe you can throw it in the chat when we're ready for it, if you don't mind.
Sure.
Okay. Give me 1 second to do that, folks. And then Sandy, do you want to introduce yourself real quick? And Peter, do you want to introduce yourself as well?
Sure. So I'm Sandy. I'm with Community Cycles. So if anybody is not familiar with us, we're a local nonprofit bike shop. So we take in donated bicycles, parts, whatever from the community. We reuse what we can, we recycle what we cannot. And then we also have an outreach and advocacy arm to advocate for safer infrastructure for cyclists and pedestrians. And then we just go out in the community to promote cycling and, you know, just saving carbon emissions. So kind of just, you know, going at it from all angles with that. So happy to be here as part of, you know, a nonprofit in the community to help convey this messaging.
Thanks.
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Peter Ford. I'm a Civic Spark Fellow serving with Boulder County in the Oscar department. So I apologize for being a little late here, but a lot of the projects I've been working on are related to e-bikes. So right now that looks like promoting the statewide e-bike rebate program, and also working on safety messaging and just kind of getting the word out to community members that there's a lot of money out there and rebates out there for purchasing new e-bikes, and also preparing them to be safe while they're riding it. So happy to be here today.
And Peter, congratulations on the county's website. Do you want to share the link with everybody here by chance?
Yeah, absolutely.
all
Let me drop
just
it.
Got your page live. It's great.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I'll put the link in the chat for everyone. Thanks.
Okay, was everybody able to access the Jamboard? Cool. And has everybody been able to put their names in the chat? Appreciate that. And Tila, you were here last time, right? Do we need to circle around and introduce you? I'm sorry, I'm getting a little, all the meetings are blending together.
That's fine. And I'm on my computer and the camera isn't working, so that's why I'm off camera. But I am also a member of Community Cycles Advocacy Committee. I've been working with them for a number of years, and I've served 7 years on the City of Boulder Transportation Advisory Board.
Awesome. Thank you.
And the one thing I'm going to be looking for in our messaging today, just the filter I'm trying to put things through, is why are we so specific to e-bikes? Because most of the comments and most of the angst that I'm seeing is about the things that are souped up electric motorbikes that are neither class 1 nor 2 nor 3 bikes that are street legal in Colorado. And so I'll be looking for, like, why is this any different messaging than what we tell people for bikes in general? Thanks.
Really good point. I think that's a great discussion for today too. If you all don't mind, if you're on the Jamboard, if you can scroll over up top, use the little arrows that sort of right in the middle if you're in it, and slide over to, I guess, board number 8. And let me know if you're all there. Anybody having trouble getting to board 8? Okay. So looking back at the previous Jamboards, what I did was try to consolidate all of the ideas that were thrown out there of what's needed or what we could do or should do, and try to organize it in a way that made sense and logical sense as far as the reality of what can we get done now versus later. So I just wanted to show you and see if as a work group, this feels right, or sort of we're on the right path. That right now, if we focus on what's on the left side, we're really looking at developing potentially the handout that has e-bike safety messages, kind of common courtesies, kind of what's in that first sticky tab there. And what may go along with that is a web page, whether it's on Community Cycles webpage or they link to like a county webpage, but we'll make this stuff public once it's developed, and possibly have some social media templates to be able to help put out these safety messages, which the original idea was right alongside or in partnership with all of the rebate messaging that's going out right now too. There's money, the county has money to pay Pivot Communications, who's agreed to help us develop a handout and potentially some social media templates. And the green note is there with I'm assuming this came from Sandy, was the offer to be able to share the resource. So right now we're just focusing kind of on this very front end, if that feels right to you all. The other more medium term kind of fall, winter, are some other ideas that have been thrown out, which is potentially a user agreement, a photo shoot with local families riding e-bikes that we can then beef up our social media presence with now images, not just messages, maybe some videos, a buyer's guide for families or youth around use, a school district policy, school district curriculum, signage on roads, all of these other wonderful ideas but that's not what we have time to tackle right now. So just to try to make sure we're all on the same page, we're really focusing just on that front end of a resource that we can distribute more quickly than the rest of it. If you go to slide 9, if you want to, any comments or questions about that time frame or any revisions people want to make, or is that feeling okay as far as trying to get us organized a little bit?
From the school district's point of view, this is an appropriate timeline and scope of work. And I like the methodical one step at a time. We're learning as we're going, and we can always go back and revise these messages as we learn about how effective they are.
Absolutely. And I wanted to capture everybody's ideas, even though we don't know that we're going to get to all of them or who will get to them at some point, but we've got it captured to share and to refer back to whenever needed. So go ahead and feel free. This Jamboard will stay live, so you can make edits or make changes at any time, but that's wanted to show you that was on board 8. If you scoot over to board 9, after talking with the designers yesterday with Pivot and knowing that this is sort of our honed in focus, like I said up top are their agreements. They will design the flyer for us that schools could use individually, or that, you know, we all as partners could use individually and hand out. And then depending on how time intensive or how detailed we get in our flyer, there might be plenty of money to do a social media campaign too. That's a little to be determined, but they would make the look go hand in hand. That obviously the reference and the social media templates would go hand in hand. So today, so this is our timeline for our work group for right now to kind of get us to that final flyer. This is what the designer said they need from this work group. Is today we kind of need to decide on some priority messages and some priority design concepts, and we'll get to that later. And these aren't going to be the final set. It's just this group needs to hone in on what we feel are the top 6 or 7. And then there's going to be some homework for this group is to go vet this with teachers and youth, their kids or peers or whoever it might be, to get their same gut reactions. We'll do it together as a group today, and then go forth and conquer and get some feedback from some other people, especially maybe youth and principals and their families if they're at all available. I know it's crazy time for them, but, and then we'll come back next week and kind of decide on the final version of messaging so the designers can really make sure that the messages we want can fit. And that will give them a little bit of time to give us a proof by August 30th. That's their goal, is to give us our first flyer by August 30th. Then we can kind of go take that round for a round 2, vet it around, see if anybody has any major issues with it, love it, whatever it might be. Come back, give that feedback on the September 13th so they can get us a final flyer by the 20th. So looking at this time frame, are there any major concerns that anyone has with being able to accomplish this right now? And Landon, does this feel like an okay time frame, knowing that this is the parameters that the designers kind of gave us to work within? We can always extend it, but I don't know that we can do it any faster.
Right, that was going to be my question.
Yeah.
Given that the first day of school is today, and that patterns are set for transportation, and that parents are eager to absorb new information, sooner is better. So
Sure.
if there's any way, and I'm just tossing this in, that Pivot, that we could simplify the work for Pivot, digest it as much as possible so that Pivot could have an easier time of producing the flyer, let's try that.
Okay. And that's where, if we like that first flyer and we don't need any second round revisions, then it could be finalized even quicker. It's sort of more how much, the more that we can give them the upfront, this is what we want, the quicker it's going to go.
And I was going to say there's a back to school night on September 16th. And that might be a good goal. And I think that's with the county with Erica Amador, or is she City of Boulder? I'm sorry, I forget.
Oh, Erica's with the city, right, John?
City. Okay.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay.
She was in the city.
But yeah, there's a back to school night with a number of various entities, and I'm surprised the county is not involved, and you should be, and you can be. But that's on the Saturday, the 16th, if that's a good date
The
to
event
aim
at the
for.
Boulder Junction. Yeah, okay, yeah.
And I was thinking the same thing with the back to school nights. I know they're all different in Longmont. Elementary, high and middle schools are all different, but if we can kind of tag team, and that's one of my reasons too for asking if there's anyone else I don't know, Cammy, have you gotten other feedback from other St. Vrain schools? Just in terms of participating in this, it would be great to have some information to as many of those as we can, and I might be able to squeeze some in.
Yeah. Well, I hear it too, and that's why I think, you know, if the designers are out next week or for 3 days next week. So they're like, if you can get us that first batch of information that you all want, we'll whip out that first draft as quickly as possible. So I do think it sounds like we could maybe scoot it up a little bit. I think it's just the clearer we are up front, the easier it's going to be for them to not have to go revise. I mean, we've all been involved with designers and projects like this, so we kind of know how it works, but so that's our goal today, is to really look at, and I think Tila, this goes back to what you were saying, is the messaging that is really e-bike specific. Doesn't make sense to still do a handout on that isn't duplicative of just regular messaging, and is doing a handout still feel like the right approach with the messages that are sort of left and been distilled down that might be e-bike specific if we like some of them or all of them. So that's sort of our charge today. And then again, to look at a few design concepts of just what's the vibe we're going for. And I'll walk you through that process. We're going to do some voting as a group. So if you go to the next slide on the Jamboard. These are the sort of condensed messages. And then on slide 11, oh, sorry, that's going to be your homework. Melissa will share with you. And actually, Melissa, if you want to drop into the chat, the PDF, we have to look at kind of the design options. Everybody will have what they need for the rest of the meeting. And I'm going to go ahead and share my screen.
I don't think that worked, but give me 1 second and I'll put it in there.
So I'm going to share my screen as we kind of move things around here potentially as a group. Now I'm fully expecting that there's going to be some reactions to what's on slide 10. But of the messages that were sort of e-bike specific recommendations that weren't necessarily the same for a regular bike, these are the 6 or 7 messages that came out as potentially worth distilling out somehow and then putting them in family-friendly, youth-friendly language. That has not necessarily been done yet, but the options are reinforce learning about the Colorado safety stop law and what that means, which is general to kind of all bikes. The crosswalks when passing and walkers, the kind of giving them a guidance of around how fast to go and slowing down and giving that child or that youth-friendly point of reference of running is about 10 miles, 8 miles, just so they can kind of get a feel. It'd feel like someone running past you if you're going faster than 8 miles an hour. Learning the school's policies around e-bike locations, if and where you might need to dismount, and if and where you need to lock your bikes, something around that. Reinforcing the take advantage of the Learn to e-bike classes that are out there for youth and families to get involved with. Possibly reinforcing that 16-year-olds should not be on class 3 e-bikes, or 16 and younger should not be. And then some of the courtesies that seem to wanted to be really highlighted is that braking and slowing takes longer for e-bikes than regular bikes. So begin braking earlier to avoid crashing into other things or people. And then kind of that announcing yourself when you pass people, either with a bell or a voice, whatever it might be. Don't surprise people, give them a chance to step aside. And yes, please feel free, whoever added a note, others do. So these were sort of the distilled version. So I'd love your gut reactions of potentially more core specific to e-bikes, not necessarily all generic to any bike.
Tammy, what does the upper right-hand corner one mean?
Oh, yes. What did I miss
Oh.
that one? You're right. Sorry, let me see. Ask your school district if they have an e-bike use.
That's where I got
Oh,
stuck.
whoops, it got cut off. I think it was going to be an agreement, which is one of the topics we wanted. The principals
Okay.
have talked about developing an e-bike use agreement that families sign just to make sure those basic kind of rules or expectations or norms or whatever are reinforced. So
Okay.
they pitched that out there as, would that be something to develop?
Yeah, okay. I unfortunately have a conflict at 1, so I'm gonna add in a couple notes while you're talking and then
Sure.
I'll have to go. So I had another thought. Oh, well, thank you.
Oh, please, 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 please.
No, I lost it again, so.
And let me add use agreement. There we
Oh,
go.
there you go. It's there.
Yeah,
For
it
some
just needs
reason
to
it's
be
not.
resized somehow.
There
we go.
you go. Okay. Yeah, and again, I would think like that is applicable to all bikes and scooters, you know?
Mhm.
So I'm really wondering, do we need separate messaging for e-bikes at all, other than the safety stop? Well, that's also applicable to bikes. The differences between class e-bikes, and then I even saw some confusion on earlier boards of the Jam board, thinking that a class 3 e-bike is an electric motorbike, and it is not. Those are two
Yep.
very different things. Class E will only assist up to 28 miles an hour. And I think some of these people are thinking the ones that go to 35, 60 miles an hour, and that's missing from here. That's really, I think, the biggest take home and source of confusion.
Or motorbike versus e-bike. Yeah, I'm
Right.
gonna add that as something that maybe we wanna. Landon, I know you're sort of the solo school district representative, but when you were having chats with the school staff and principals, do you think these were the kinds of things they were looking for that are above and beyond the shared messaging that could go for either an e-biker or a regular bicyclist?
Right. The principals are thinking about outcomes and the behavior of their students, particularly on school grounds. So I think they would get behind any messages that reinforce, let's call it smart bicycling and prudent behavior. Specifically, in some way or another, these all do apply.
Okay.
I have a comment, this maybe building a little bit on what Tila introduced earlier today, which is, to what extent do we need to amplify the messages that are already available for smart bicycling?
Mhm.
And what behaviors in particular need to be called out? So to answer my own question, I looked up at the League of American Bicyclists, and as you may know, there are 5 rules of the road. And I think I left a link in last meeting, but I can send it again and write them out. But they're quite simple. The first one is follow the rules, follow the law, and then be predictable, be conspicuous, ride ready, and think ahead. Now they're general, of course, and they need to be explained for anyone to understand them. But I guess the reason I'm bringing them up is, could we be effective in this campaign by using existing bicycle rules and just specify parts of them that apply to this new kind of machine that is bigger and accelerates more quickly and that is faster?
I like that thing, because that goes back with the original sort of charge to the group, is there might be a set of core messages that are kind of generic for everybody, good to reinforce kind of those, like you said, maybe the 5 basic rules of the road, those core messages. And then there might be a handful of either, whether it's just extra tips or a different section or whatever to be determined, but a few extra comments or tips that are, like you said, context specific, audience specific.
Well, and with it being audience specific, I think that has to do with these are people who don't know the rules of the road. They have not
Right.
had driver's ed, like how do you distill those whatever those rules that we want them to follow, how do you distill those down into age appropriate messaging for them, and how do you get them to read it?
Right, which I think brings up a bigger need for more education around all of this in general that our handout is not necessarily going to solve, but I think all of these are very valid points.
I would just add also, oh, sorry, Lauren, after you.
Go ahead. Oh, I was gonna say, well, thank you for bringing that up, because I actually had written those down, because that was a safety spiel that I gave this morning on my ride. Follow the law, which I think is huge, and the safety stop law is, I think, a little confusing, but very specific. And just to follow the law at all, like, yes, there is a law when it comes to bicycling, and so we all need to follow the law as being number one. So I'm glad you brought that up, Landon, and I think that keeping the message brief, I think that's the most important thing. To me, when I look at this, and I know this language is not distilled yet, but if we're saying here 16 and older, and here 15 and younger, I think we need to just keep messages general, and following the law is, yay, someone wrote it. Number one, follow the law. 2, be predictable. I had an e-bike pass me on the right side the other day. She was probably doing 25 and I was doing 20 on my regular bike. And she looked at me and said, sorry. And I'm like, anyway, it's all about being predictable. Okay, that's it. Go ahead, Landon.
Yeah, I'm just typing it up. In the way I'm thinking about these messages for students, and maybe the audience is also parents, of course, because of that two-way communication. I'm thinking about how can we influence the attitude of those riding bicycles, both a regular bicycle and an e-bike, the attitude that they bring to operating, and how can we influence their conduct? And those two things seem to play together. Kind of what is your mindset as an operator of a bicycle, and how will you behave in the public realm? The wild card here is skills. As we know, the quickness of an e-bike, the weight of it, the fact that it's so fun to load up 2 or 3 young people at the same time and maybe not wear a helmet. And then there comes braking and turning and loose surfaces and so forth. Skills is the wild card that we may have to address another way. But just to repeat, if we can somehow positively influence the attitude of the operator and therefore the behavior, I think we'll be getting ahead of the game with these messages.
Makes sense.
Yeah, I agree with what I'm hearing people say, but I also, I think like Tila's right, trying to just focus on e-bikes isn't always the answer. And as Lauren was pointing out, it's so disconcerting when somebody's passing on the right like that. And I kind of feel like this is the key message that needs to be getting out there. The slower you are, be towards the right, a little faster left of that. And, the passing happens on the left, because ultimately we actually need to reinforce this even on our roads. So, it's just a very solid, important message, I think, needs to be kind of driven in a little bit more deeply. And, I'd also say with the safety stuff, I don't really see talking about that deeply in the school environment, because the majority of the kids are not to use that. So, it's kind of weird to me to say, here's what this law is, but you don't get to use it. So just, we need that emphasis of follow the traditional law for kids at that age. A stop sign is a stop sign.
Well, a number of you said follow the law, and I think that's great. So is our opportunity here to point families and students to where they can find what that even means? Because just saying follow the law, or make sure you know the rules of the road, when they have no idea where to find that, because correct, some of these kids aren't going to be old enough. Is this an opportunity we want to take advantage of to point people in the right direction for what that means and what they should be reading about and or learning about?
Oh, for sure. I think it's a great opportunity to do that. I think that's the biggest part of this whole, the least specific thing in here. I mean, it's specific to follow the law, but it's not specific to what that means.
I'm thinking, any kind of incentives, like having a mentorship or a good cop. I don't know what, I mean, obviously, I don't have anything or a close connection right now, but if there were some kids who demonstrated responsible e-bike riding on campus or even regular riding on campus, and they were rewarding people with, I think of like trip tracker incentives or something like that, rewarding the kids who are following the rules, and whether it's a free ice cream or a whatever that incentivizing program looks like, just to encourage kids to behave well and ride safely and all that. I mean, not every single person is going to be recognized, but there's some chance of getting, a free water bottle or whatever it is.
Lauren, I'll back you up on the positive reinforcement. And then going back to the messages, and I'm just listening to what you're saying, and something Cami said, which is, how about core messages that elicit a response, that trigger thinking and trigger awareness? And then that's the opportunity to provide resources and specific explanations and point people to the partners that have thought about this more deeply. But for example, as someone said, just the fact of the statement, follow the law, can ring a bell for someone to say, oh, there are rules. And a curious person will ask what they are. So last thing I'll say is, I think we're trying to hit a kind of cognitive level, if that's how you say it, of 4th or 5th grade. And that's a marketing ploy someone brought up in the last meeting, that all messages out in the public realm need to be simple and short. And again, can be relevant and then push people down the road to learn more. I'm saying this as statements, but I'm looking for reactions.
Yeah. I liked your summary, Landon, too, and the idea of like what I've heard is, let's simplify these messages, keep them simple, obviously, but really reinforce those core safety messages, whether they're e-bike or not, but that will elicit like the positive behaviors essentially, and or lead people to the information they may need to know and not have yet. So there might be a bit of a mix of both, like we said, core messages and sort of specific to writing on campus or kind of school-based messages all mixed in, because it sounds like we kind of need both, but really to focus on what is the right, positive, enjoyable, safe behavior. And if you don't have the information you need, where do you get it? And I think those things can be accomplished in a handout. Well, I'm going to leave this here. I'm going to stop sharing because I want to move us over to the handout that Melissa, were you able to throw it in the chat? Okay.
Yeah, is everyone able to have access to it now?
Hi, Darcy.
That last link.
Do you want to just introduce yourself real quick while we're pulling up the other handout? Yeah.
Sure, and I apologize for being so late. I'm really sorry.
No worries.
I'm Darcy Kitching with Boulder Transportation Connections and the Boulder Chamber, colleague of Lane, who's also here.
Yes, and Darcy's been an awesome youth transportation advocate for years and years and doing great stuff here in Boulder. So happy to have you. So I'm going to switch us over to the handout that Melissa shared, because this kind of gets to some of the other pieces we've been talking about, is what is the actual collateral material we might need. So does everyone have that open by chance?
Okay. Darcy, I am trying to get you the link.
Okay, and I'm gonna.
I think you missed.
It's asking for a code,
Well,
verification code.
well, that is weird. Interesting. Well, here.
The most recent one, I was able to enter my email and get sent a verification code.
To access the file?
Yeah.
That is the strangest thing. I have no idea what that is.
Oh,
So-
it's a SharePoint thing.
Okay. Yeah. Well, anyway, I'm going to share it. So, and you don't necessarily need to have it, and I can send it afterwards, which I will send it afterwards, but going back to the beginning when I was shouting out to the wonderful resources that Community Cycles has, I know one of the conversations early on was to talk about if we create some basic safety messaging to go along with the e-bike or the rebates and kind of have them coupled up together to reinforce the behavior with the access piece. That the state shared yesterday or 2 days ago or a couple days ago at our local MAC coalition meeting is that when any e-bike that is purchased through the rebate program through the state's version, and maybe City of Boulder's too, I'm not sure, but at least through the state's version, they're automatically going to get a follow-up email, and within that email is going to be a link directly to the amazing e-bike hub that Community Cycles has put together. So shout out to Sandy and everyone else there, because it's such a good, well built out resource already that a lot of these other topics that we say people need to know, it's already compiled and they're already there. And this screenshot is just one of the many sections on their hubs. And so what we are proposing, just to kind of reiterate, is that what we might come up with is just a new resource that could be listed here, that the e-biking with kids resources is really, how do you pick like the trailer bike or the cargo bike or a front rider or back rider with like more like little kids? That's what that one's about. So we might be developing essentially the generically titled kind of kids who e-bike, things for families and our youth to kind of think of, whether it's always campus-based or not, just as another way to distill some information.
And I actually came across a very nice video about that. I'll drop a link into the chat
Beautiful.
about that one,
Thank
because
you.
it was pretty well done.
So shifting our brains out of messages, because we've been focusing on that for a few weeks, because we'll get there with the messaging. One of the things that I wanted this group to kind of think through is if we're doing a handout, right? That's sort of the charge now. Maybe that has some combined general reinforcement of behaviors and some school specific context stuff. What do you think would be the most well received? And this is going to be your homework to go ask others, like, what do they like? But essentially, I'd like to walk us through kind of each row, kind of the high detail, medium detail, low detail. That will be one category we're going to vote on as a group. Kind of row 2. Do we think real images, graphic images, or illustrative images are the way to go? And do we like the idea of a tagline, an acronym, title only, some of both? So we're going to vote on sort of our preferred makeup of kind of A through I. And then I would love for you to all kind of go ask these same questions to others as well. So we can really give that designer, here is the direction we want you to go. So that first draft is as close to something we would like as possible. So can you all see these options okay? Here, I'm going to try to make them bigger. So after kind of looking at the details, knowing this might be probably most digested by middle school and high school aged families, if it comes to be, not so many, what we've heard is not so many e-bike riders at the young elementary school age, not that there's none, but maybe not as many, but wanting to keep things simple. Are there any gut reactions to having something that might be a little bit more detailed, like the first example that's yellow, to something that's very, very, very low detail further on the right, or something in the middle that has a little bit of detail, but it's also still pretty simple language? Does that feel like enough? Or do we need more details to really be able to give the principals and the schools sort of what they're looking for? So just gut reaction kind of on the A, B, or C options.
I think B is kind of wordy for school age kids. You want to kind of grab them, pull them in, and give them something that will help them remember the tips. So B and C for that.
Agreed. I like B. I think I like C the best for that age group. B is a little simplistic maybe for middle and high school, but the one on the left of the A is probably a lot of words that won't get read.
Too much. Okay.
I would add though that the A on the left side is the most attractive and most adult, and might have the most attention from young people. The two on the right look slightly educational, remedial, and that's a big turnoff. We want to make sure the middle schoolers and high schoolers at least look at it. So that graphic image, no, the real image of someone doing something might attract attention.
I agree with you, Landon, that it looks nice and it looks more like a more adult and but it does have a lot. I don't think it would really get read and digested. You could do both. You could do the real image on with something with simpler text and like the acronym, you know. But I think B would be attractive to kids at several different levels. Just, you know, quick, digest this. I think C is much too simplistic, but the middle one is really, it has enough detail and it has quick things you can learn from.
I'm with you. I like B the best. I think it is direct and simple and it has some fun graphics and some color, and I think it really gets all ages. And I hope we do two sides too.
The original thought was the backside would reinforce, like, where do you get the rebate information and maybe where do you get legal information? So this front side could really be those core messages we're talking about, the safety messages. So
Awesome.
whether it's just the generic, let's reinforce like the ride safe one, the middle one is maybe it's the 5 rules of the road or something. And then down below could be more of those school specific, context specific extra tips or something. And then
Okay.
the back would have legal and rebate.
Just as long as we're not wasting that other side with white, just that's what I want to make sure of.
Well,
Yeah.
and Tammy, maybe the second side could also have want to learn more tips on riding safely, a link for
Get them to the hub.
community cycles or wherever, yeah.
Yeah. So I think all of the links of like where to find more, that was what the thought would be on the back. And the front would really be those, what are those core messages we want to drive home? And if they do just quickly glance at it, or we want to grab their attention or speak their language, you know, what's on the front that's really the safety messaging pieces, and then the back can have all the reinforcing information.
And one other thing about the back, you could write out a URL, but if you can have like a QR code so somebody could like readily Bing get to it, that might be really good.
And like we said, so much of this extra stuff that we're talking about that would be wonderful for our families to have and or learn, Community Cycles already has it compiled. We can just send pretty much to the e-bike. I keep combining e-bike and rebate as a new word. It's just driving me nuts that I'm not saying them as separate words. But their hub is so well done. So much of what we're talking about that would be good for families to have is already been compiled in their hub.
Oh, thanks. And yeah, and like I think I mentioned earlier in the sticky notes there on the Jamboard that we can add another section for whatever it is that y'all need, because this is a really important one.
Well, thanks, Sandy, for saying that. I'm so glad you're here, because we didn't want to reinvent the wheel that you've already had created, but we thought this was a bit of a flip of the way other things have been presented that might be helpful for many still. So far what I'm hearing is that D, real images, is preferred, but also kind of that concept of B, kind of medium detail. And that maybe the idea of an acronym or some sort of like the 5 rules, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or SAFE, like some sort of simple organizing structure is also appealing. Is that safe to say, or did I miss here? I've been trying to kind of keep tallies of the positives and negatives on each of the options so far.
That sounds right to me. And I just want to add that on the concept of not reinventing the wheel, that if we can tap into existing core messages, for example, the League of American Bicyclists, in some ways it gives cover and justification, legitimacy of what our messages are. And it's a way to have a kind of a blanket, consistent set of themes that we can expound upon, but that don't need to be, anyway, they're just clear cut. and that show a hierarchy of effort from national level, state level, advocacy, local level, that we are in this as partners in a way.
Great, I like it. Some of you created or had suggested some great taglines too, but that's on an earlier Jamboard. So there's some cute ones to consider there too, but to, yeah, not created necessarily a new one landed, but reinforce those that are already existing. So do we agree that C is maybe just not enough detail? B to A somewhere in the middle of, or B feels more right, but we prefer the real images. And that might be what we can guide the designer to as far as how to organize or how to design some of this information.
I think maybe the C is, I just think, really too elementary. I think that would
Yep.
be a turnoff for a lot of kids because it looks a little bit
Okay.
yeah, it just there's not a lot of information there. But B is great because I also like this know your type chart at the bottom where I think some young people are not necessarily aware of the different types of e-bikes and that they might have something that's really different than somebody else. I don't know, that is really instructive, I think. And you know, real pictures could be nice, but I think the graphic images are also appealing.
And correct me if I'm gonna zoom in a little bit, but I think that just that example of that table at the bottom, not that it has to be these messages, but I think we zoom in, going back to Tila's earlier point, it does mention the motorbike versus like the e-bike as a way to sort of quickly and simply reinforce that they are not the same thing and come up, you know, with whatever the categories are. I can't read it, it's a little small, but whether they're saying they recommend them or they like them or kids should ride them or not, but they've got just yes or no answers, whatever they are. Can't read it, but. Oh, the image at the bottom, I just wanted to, forgot that it was on there, it was off the screen, but for those of you who don't know, one of the topics that came up was about how, you know, where e-bikes have been allowed and not allowed, and that's changing and it's expanding more than necessarily declining where they're allowed, but that people were really getting called out in nasty ways for riding an e-bike where others assumed they couldn't. So folks who needed, who had permission essentially to ride because they had some sort of adaptive bike or whatever it was, were given these blue stickers. And I believe this is through the City of Boulder's Parks and Open Space program. And someone else can chime in on that, but bikes were identified as like, they're allowed here no matter what. If you didn't have the sticker, you might not be on that trail, but if they were on this trail, please don't be mean to anybody because they can be here. So it's just an interesting way to reinforce users and non-users learning how to coexist and be pleasant to one another. So I thought it was a great example of that. I don't know if anyone has any feedback on was that successful or not, that campaign, or how that's been working, but
I was completely unaware of that.
is
So-
anyone in the loop of that? Yeah, and it may be an old campaign, but I can get more information if we're interested.
Yeah, I have not heard about that either. If that was Open Space Mountain Parks initiative from the city, but I do like the idea of, I like the second graph handout example here because it has kind of two messaging pieces to it. And yeah, I think including maybe something on it about, you know, the types of e-bikes and where they can't be ridden would be great.
I like that. And Peter, do you remember we were in that meeting together with County Parks and Open Space? Maybe it was, do you remember, was it just the county program? I can't remember if that was, we can follow up with Tina and maybe ask too and get some more information.
Sorry, I'm sorry, Cami, what exactly are you asking?
Oh, it was just, do you remember that, did Tina say that the example of the picture of the bikes that were identified with stickers as like, okay to be on any trail because this person had an adaptive need? That
Yeah, the
was like
sticker
they were
idea is new
okay.
to me.
Yeah.
I do know that there's special exceptions for adaptive e-bikes and people with disabilities, so on trails. So, but yeah, the sticker idea is new to me.
All right, well, in the interest of time, I'm gonna stop sharing. The thought was, would you all be willing as work group members, this is my ask and my hope, to take, I'll give you the examples and go, we have our vote on what we like, but go see if you can find some teenagers, some principals, some parents, ask them what they prefer. I will clean up and put it in a Word document, our sample language or some prose language, maybe throw in some of the language that comes from like our professional partners, like the league, some of those, and get some gut reactions from our potential end users of this product, not just our brain. And that all of that, if you can send it to me by next Wednesday, I can then pass it on to the designer to come up with a first draft. Is that something you all are willing to do, or at least hopefully a number of you? Yay. Okay, great. Thank you.
Tammy, do you plan on presenting this to the Growing Up Boulder Steering Committee tomorrow? If you don't, I could bring it up there.
Please do. I am not sure if I can make it. And I was gonna say, if you're in any meetings or any opportunities where you can share it with groups, please do. Because I know we all attend some, but can't make all of them. So thank you, Darcy. And more than welcome. So what I'm gonna do is on that proposed timeline that I think was on Jamboard 8, I'm gonna send meetings for all of those dates. So on one I wanted to call attention to is on August. So if we turn in all of our feedback by the 23rd, that's kind of our charge right now. The designer would like to get together on the 24th or 25th with as many of you as possible, might be a small subgroup of the work group, to really hone in and refine the messaging. So, you know, at some point we're gonna just have to make some decisions, and lots of cooks in the kitchen. Sometimes it's hard to get to those decisions so we can get to what is on the first draft. So if you want to be a part of that, let me know, and I'll make sure you get the invite. He preferred the 25th, which is Friday. So if anybody has availability on Friday, the 25th, let me know, and I will make sure you get invited to whatever time I get set up with him. Because that's where he was hoping that we'd have, here's the design elements we like, here's the design style we want to go for, here's kind of that. All of that, and here are some of those key messages we know we want to start with. We'll refine it, but at least the ones that we know we want to start with, so he can start getting something built. Okay. So Landon, we want to take just the last few minutes and maybe discuss the idea of a user agreement and how this group may or may not be able to get feedback on that?
Yes, but may I pose a question to the group? And this is for review to youth and principals and friends and so forth. There's this concept of safety. It's something that we know is a priority to all of us. It's also is a loaded word and can be a turnoff. I'd be curious to know what you find and what you think, each of you, about the main slogan that we use, and if the word safe or safety should be in it. So for example, the examples that Cami showed us, there was an e-bike right slogan, and the middle one was safe. We know that we're pushing safety, but do we have to state it? And is there another way to incorporate that emphasis without the word? I think, I hope that's a clear question for us to ponder.
I guess one thing that goes through my head is practicing kindness is a way to make us all safer, but you know, does that work and resonate with everybody? Because to me, you know, it falls into the there's an anarchic element many of us have inside where like, follow the law. I don't want to follow the law, but then we need to share like, no, the laws are there to make it more predictable, easier for everybody. So, you know, how do we get that message out that it's not just, you know, you're following the law to, you know, not get a ticket. It's because doing so makes you more predictable, makes us all come in and do all this better together. And maybe that's where we need to stress on better together, you know, when we follow these practices.
Or does this age group want to be all individuals and different? That's a
And
hard
these are
one.
great questions to potentially pose when you're getting that feedback too, is just tell me how you react to the word safety versus things to know, things to do, where to go, like those kinds of the other W's versus safe kind of thing. Would you rather have it come at you that way or kind of this way, and sort of see what kind of gut reactions you get from the potential teenagers we may talk to, because the adults are going to say something different than the teenagers for sure.
And maybe that's what needs to happen, is a little powwow with some teenagers that would be like, what are the words that convey this message to you? Because it's a great point, and Sandy's saying, but I want to be independent, I want to be unpredictable. So I'm old enough, it's like, it's okay to be sort of predictable, but I know I didn't always feel that way, right?
Well, in a perfect world, Elaine, that's the best idea, that we would be getting focus groups from kids, but in the essence of time, that's hopefully what I'm hoping the homework will be, is this will be our touch points with youth, just because we have this time limited element we're working with. It's not necessarily the ideal way to do it, but at least that way we know we did get touch points from parents and kids and or potential staff, if at all possible, without having to wait a whole get a whole nother group of people organized and wait for another meeting and all of that. That's what, like, if there's groups you can take it to that are existing, great. And or neighbors, families, friends, all valid data, all valid feedback.
I mean, can you send the mock-ups, those,
Oh, yeah.
those 3 options in a PDF or something that we
Yeah.
could shop around? Because I can think of some people I could take it to for some feedback.
Oh, and sorry if I didn't say that earlier. I thought I may have, but if I didn't, I'll send you the mock-up ideas, a couple questions, and then the sample language we have all in a single document. Just give me half an hour to kind of edit based on what we talked about today. And then I'll send that to all of you. So you should have it, by, 3 o'clock today, end of school today, hopefully. And then same time, same place next week. Does that work for all of you? Since we've been doing Wednesdays at either this 12 or 12:30 time, just for that, let's collect it, send it off to the designer. And then I think we might have a bit of a break until the designer gives us a proof. Cool. And if you are all fine with, do we need to not register for another Zoom meeting? Are you fine if I just send like a Teams meeting invite or a Google invite instead? Is that preferred at this point? I think we know who's attending and who isn't. Okay. But anyone's welcome. So tell others people they can come to. So, all right. Well, I really appreciate all of you taking the time. I know it's exactly 1:30. I'll let you go, but thank you, work group. Thank you for following through in the homework. Really appreciate your feedback.
Thanks, Cammie.
You're welcome.
Thanks so
you.
much.
Thank you, Jamie.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Cammie.
Thanks,
Yeah.
everyone.
See you.
Cammy,
Bye, everybody.
Cammy and Landon, could you hang on for a sec?
Yeah,
after
let
you
me
finish?
stop
You
recording.
Stop the
Just-
recording.
Yeah, let me.
Darcy, I have 1 minute. I'm supposed to go to another meeting. No, it's okay.
No, I'm sorry. No, I was just gonna ask you, Elaine and I were talking